I can't stand them. I hate Boston. Great city, great fans. Obviously they got some great players, but he hurts me a lot. So hopefully, this offseason we find a way to get better and, add some pieces.
Joel Embiid Friday night at the finals. He was almost giddy sitting next to Paul George. And then Kendrick Perkins said, I think the final piece might be right next to you over there. The Celtics win tonight. The NBA offseason begins. You can start signing back your own free agents. We'll take a look at the offseason plan, including Joel's comments and how realistic Paul George feels. I feel like we've heard this name for like 3 years now. So we'll ask another Paul. Paul Hudrick from Liberty Ballers is back as the Sixers offseason is about to get underway. The draft is 2 weeks from now, and then, of course, free agency will begin. And we'll take a look at all of it now with Paul Hudrick from Liberty Ballers is back here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. What's up, Paul?
Mike, I'm doing great, man. Good to see you. How are you?
Yeah, man. It's, Joel Embiid out of the woodworks. Was at an NBA Finals game the other night. They found him down in the barrels of the Dallas arena. Hey, you want to go sit next to Paul George and chew it up a little bit? He seemed giddy about it. What do you read into Joel's happiness of being there with Paul George?
Well, it turns out it was his idea, Mike. As Tim Bontemps from ESPN reported that Joel Embiid was just there, right? Like he was there with Josh Harris just to watch the game. He found out that Paul George was going to be on NBA Countdown. I said, oh, let me hop on NBA Countdown. And listen, anyone who's covered Joel Embiid over the years, for him to put himself out there and say, oh, no, I want to go on NBA Countdown, that's purposeful. Like, that's a huge deal. This is a guy that doesn't always, he takes care of his obligations for the most part, but isn't always the most, kindest and cuddly with the media. So for him to go out there and say, no, Paul George is here, I want to go on there. Very purposeful stuff from him. And Mike, you and I have discussed it often. He's not a big recruiter. It's not what he's done over the years. He's generally taken a stance of, I let the front office do their thing. I'm going to do my thing. That was not the case on Friday night. That was on public television, him saying to Paul George, we want you. And that is him saying to Daryl Morey, we want him. And, Daryl Morey, I think, is saying, say less in that department, because I think it's very clear he is their number one choice.
Yeah, we've heard his name so much. I mean, it seems like his name has been reported with the team based on, a couple of factors. Is it, Paul, the cap space and it just makes sense? Or is there a relationship there that says, hey, no, these two guys would want to play with each other?
All the above, I think. And then I would also add, I'll get started with the first thing you talked about. As far as free agency goes, Paul George is probably, if he does change teams, Paul George will be the best player this offseason to change teams, most likely. I think LeBron James goes back to the Lakers. I don't think Donovan Mitchell's going anywhere. I'm not sure Jimmy Butler is going anywhere. So when you factor that in, Paul George is going to be the best possible player to leave a team, perhaps. So that's part of it. The second thing you touched on, absolutely, there is clearly a connection with Paul George and Joel Embiid. That Friday night, again, was pretty clearly Joel Embiid saying, I think Paul George could absolutely be that missing piece for our franchise. Would love to have him here. A clip has been passed around, from earlier this season where Paul George on his own podcast just gushing over Joel Embiid, talking about how he thinks Joel Embiid is this generation Shaquille O'Neal. That is not small praise, right? I mean, that's a big deal for a guy like that to say something like that. Said that they've built a relationship from, talking at All-Star games and they have a friendship. So that is very real too. The last thing I would say, Mike, is, and I'm sure we'll get into it. And some people who just really are out on Paul George for whatever reasons they have, but you will not find a cleaner on-court fit for what they need when you're talking about Tyrese Maxey, Joel Embiid, than Paul George, who is a big playmaking two-way wing that took 8 threes a game last year and made 41%. That alone, Mike, is worth its weight in gold, not factoring in that he can play defense, that he can create off the dribble, that he can get his own shot. I know this, the playoff record is spotty, whatever, but he's had some big playoff games.
Yeah.
So when you factor all that in, I think on court, he's a terrific fit with Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid.
All right, there's a lot there because, one, yes, his playoff, when he was in Indiana, he was the guy. Here he would be the third guy. The Clipper thing, all right, he's been in and out of the lineup. He's had some injury issues. Why do you feel that there is this, I'm not all that excited about Paul George? Because you seem to think that this would be the right fit and would be the perfect guy between Maxey and Embiid.
Well, to clarify, there is no such thing as a perfect basketball player. No matter, because my thing is always this, Mike. If you're a Sixers fan and you're saying to me, you don't want Paul George, give me your alternative. Who do you want? You're probably not getting LeBron James. Jimmy Butler. Okay, you want to say you want Jimmy Butler over Paul George? Okay, I can go along with that. The issue is Pat Riley is going to turn Daryl Morey upside down and shake all the contents out of his pockets out for you to get Jimmy Butler here. And then on top of that, at 35 years old, you're going to have to give him a max extension. With Paul George, you don't have to do that. It's cut and dry. You sign him, it's done. And then you go beyond that. You're not getting Donovan Mitchell. It seems very clear Donovan Mitchell is in Cleveland. So my thing is, if you're a Sixers fan and you do not want Paul George here, give me your alternative. What player do you want? You can tell me about role players. And look, I love, there's certain guys I love. I love Contavious Caldwell-Pope. You tell me that your idea is you want to sign Contavious Caldwell-Pope and, I don't know, Malik Monk. Sure, that's okay. But, Paul George would be better. It's a better option. And as you already referenced, he is going to be the third guy in the pecking order here. It is clearly Joel. It is clearly Tyrese. And then it is Paul George. And I just think about that series alone against the Knicks. If you simply swap out Paul George with Tobias Harris, this team's in the Eastern Conference Finals. It's not close. They are there. They are an Eastern Conference Finals team. If you just simply swap those two players out, not accounting for how much better Paul George is than Tobias Harris. So, look, it's an uphill battle. They're going to have to beat the Boston Celtics. The Boston Celtics look like a juggernaut, and they're going to mostly be running it back next year. But when you talk about the rest of the East, if you add Paul George to this mix and then fill out the roster, I like them over every other team in the East other than the Boston Celtics.
Yeah, Paul Hudrick from Liberty Ballers is with us. Obviously, and it's the cleanest. You can just sign him. You don't have to make a trade like you would for Jimmy Butler and some of the other names that have been out there. But he is the highest. LeBron obviously would be the highest profile free agent if he hits free agency. But he would be the highest profile free agent that would be available tomorrow if free agency started. He is a unrestricted free agent. But, Embiid going out there and being giddy like that and just being like, hey, we can make add some pieces. I mean, that was pretty unbelievable to see that. And you wonder how this Olympic thing will kind of help Joel and maybe add to that.
Yeah, I think too, Mike, this is, look, everyone kind of, we're all humans, right? We all grow, we all mature at different times, different things happen. I think if you're objective and you look at Joel Embiid, I don't know how you can't see the growth as a person, as a basketball player this guy has made over his time here. Clearly has, spent more time caring about his physical fitness and his health. Now, look, he tears his meniscus. What are you going to do? He tears his meniscus. But it was clear when he came back, he was in as good a shape as he was going to possibly get in, all things considered. We've all seen what happens in the past when Joel Embiid comes back from injuries and he's not in shape. It hasn't gone well. He scored 50 points in a playoff game. I mean, this is a thing that and the game 6, the game in which they were eliminated, Joel Embiid was great in that game. He was awesome in that game. It was Tyrese Maxey who clearly saved their season in game 5. He struggled in game 6. But I say all that to say, there is a maturation that we've seen from Joel Embiid throughout the years. And I think that is another sign of it, of instead of just saying it's the front office's job. It's not my, no, Joel, you are the franchise player. You are the star. You are the MVP of the league at one point. It's your job too, to go out there and make these guys want to come here and to recruit them. That's part of the deal when you are a star, when you are a franchise player. That comes with the territory. So I think he's recognizing that as well. That's part of it. And yeah, I think the Olympics thing is absolute. Look, he's playing with some of the, not just the greatest players in the sport currently, some of the greatest players to ever play the game. When you're talking about LeBron James, Steph Curry, like absolutely getting the chance to rub elbows with those guys, see kind of what they do behind the scenes, what makes them tick. I think it's a totally invaluable experience for Joel Embiid. He's going to learn so much. People that worry about health and injuries, like, look, he's not going up against the Boston Celtics every night. There's going to be some countries that they're just going to completely dominate and obliterate, and he's going to play like 20 minutes a night. So let's kind of curb ourselves with some of those concerns. I get him to an extent, but I think he'll be fine. I think absolutely it is a net positive, that experience for him to go to Paris and go to the Olympics.
All right, let's look at some of the other potentials out there. Let's go with OG Anunoby, who obviously played for Nick Nurse. If they could get him, would you be more excited about that fit and adding OG, a younger player, or Paul George?
Still Paul George, and that's, I love OG Anunoby's game. I think he'd be a hell of a fit. If they wind up not being able to land Paul George and Anunoby's the guy instead, that's a pretty good consolation prize in my book, because as you mentioned, he is younger. Talk about two ways. I mean, he's definitely a more impactful defender than Paul George is at his age. The offense, he can fade into the background sometimes, Anunoby, but at the same time, we saw it against the Sixers. He hit some big shots. He made some big plays. He's smart. He's capable offensively. I think there's maybe more there, and I don't know, maybe Nick Nurse can get that more out of him to make him more of like a third offensive piece. But like, as far as defensive impact goes, you're not going to find too many wings that are more impactful than an OG Anunoby. Then the other thing is, a lot of people have expressed concerns about Paul George's age and his injury history. OG Anunoby's got plenty of injury issues in his past, so that would be a pretty big concern as well. But with all that said, Anunoby as a guy that if Paul George, if that doesn't work out, Anunoby would be a fantastic fit here. I still think he winds up back with the Knicks one way or another. I don't blame Daryl Morey and the Sixers for making sure that price gets nice and high for the Knicks by putting this out there that they would be interested in him. But at the same time, I do think ultimately, considering what New York gave up to get him, how well he fit there, I think he winds up staying in New York.
Where would you be with Klay Thompson?
That's a tough one. I wouldn't be I think one idea that was kind of intriguing, I think Jake Fisher from Yahoo put this out there, is like all the balloon contract ideas, right? Like a balloon contract, meaning a high salary but low term. So like maybe like a 1+1 deal at like 20-ish million or something like that. And then what that does is too, so let's say Jimmy Butler makes the situation in Miami a nightmare, and by the deadline he's available, you could use those contracts, shipped into Miami along with your draft picks, and make that work. But at the same time, so let's say theoretically, Mike, you get Klay Thompson and you get Kentavious Caldwell-Pope on those balloon deals, $20-ish million. Look, that's a team that's probably better than last year's team, I would say, right? I mean, that's a team that you're replacing Klay Thompson and Caldwell-Pope, used instead of Tobias Harris. Those are the guys you're putting out there. That's two guys that can play both ends of the floor. They can both shoot. They're both playoff tested. They both won championships, multiple championships. So, it's kind of an interesting idea, that kind. And I guess that's where some people who don't necessarily love Paul George, that would be the direction they would go. But look, Klay Thompson is not the guy he once was. Flat out, he's not. But he can still shoot the basketball at a really high level. You think about the looks he would get, again, playing off of Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid. Same with a guy like Caldwell-Pope. I mean, that's four starters there when you talk about those guys. It's pretty high-level basketball players that, again, playoff-proven guys that have won. So that wouldn't be certainly my first choice. But if it winds up, getting down the list of choices, I don't think that's a bad one at all. And I think, Mike, this conversation, what this all illustrates is that there are options, right? Like if it doesn't work out, you have so many paths you can go down because of the flexibility you have, that I think everyone has to keep an open mind because say whatever you want about Daryl Morey. He hasn't gotten the team past the second round. There's no other way around it. But this guy's one of the most creative executives we've ever seen in this sport. And I've never known him to have this type of flexibility with a roster when you're talking about cap space, draft capital, and what he can do. So the possibilities are kind of endless here.
Yeah, and the creativity because of the flexibility. I mean, but does he want to straight trade? I mean, a straight sign a free agent, or a lot of people asking, hey, can you get creative and come up with a trade that people aren't really talking about outside of the aging veteran guys like a Jimmy Butler? We've heard Brandon Ingram's name, but is there somebody else? I know Lauri Markkanen's name seemingly fringing out there, but is there somebody else that you would be intrigued that maybe his name's not popping a whole heck of a lot, that they do have the ability to get creative with?
I'll start this off by saying I am I hate that I've become this, but I'm like a Brandon Ingram truther now, because I just think he's so much better than what people realize. And then on top of that, he's 26 years old, and you're giving him the Nick Nurse. Nick Nurse is one hell of a coach. We've seen what he's done with guys, what he's gotten out of guys. We saw what he got out of Kelly Oubre this year. Imagine, him getting his hands on Brandon Ingram. I would be very intrigued by that. Some people would not. Fair enough. But I do think there's no reason to think that these guys would necessarily be available. But sure, I think Kevin O'Connor of The Athletic mentioned LaMelo Ball. Maybe Charlotte, if they draft a guard early, would they then be looking for a team that would take on LaMelo Ball? And a LaMelo Ball, Tyrese Maxey backcourt would be really, really intriguing. LaMelo, when he is healthy, he is awesome. He's a high volume 3-point shooter at a high level creator, can allow Maxey to play a lot of reps off the ball. You put him and Joel Embiid in a pick and roll, and good luck. I think he's an underrated defender. I think he's a better defender than what people give him credit for. He plays really hard on that end, actually. So if there is a way, if Charlotte is open to trading him, I think Daryl Morey would absolutely be interested in that. I seen the name Cade Cunningham thrown around at Detroit wants to kind of start over. Huh. It's intriguing. And especially with I think the thing with Cunningham is he's still on such a low salary because he's still on his rookie deal. And you could still do a lot of things in free agency if you were to figure out a trade for him. But I don't know if those guys are going to be available. I don't know. Who knows what's going to happen between now and then. I'd say too, the other thing, when you're talking about flexibility and having all this, think about what the Celtics right now are coasting to an NBA Finals. When they made that Porzingis trade and that Holiday trade, the offseason was over, right? That was deep into the offseason. So I think it just shows you, if you position yourselves with star players and assets, you almost have to just kind of wait for your opportunity and wait for something to arise that makes sense for you. And the Celtics found two great deals, getting Porzingis and getting Holiday, that didn't seem like they were even going to be on the table. Think about it, Mike, if we were a year ago, if we were talking about the Celtics, you would have never thought Kristaps Porzingis would be a Celtic or that Drew Holiday would be a Celtic, right? We never would have seen those things coming, but they happened. So I think, again, it just speaks to all that flexibility, and that we just all have to keep an open mind for what could be out there.
All right, Paul Hudrick, Liberty Ballers. Let's go to who they have. Batum, Lowry, Oubre, DeAnthony Melton's an interesting one. Cameron Payne, Buddy Hield. In your mind, any of those going to be priorities?
I think they would love to get Batum back if he doesn't retire, and I think Batum was very happy here. I think he did enjoy his time. I think he loved playing with Joel Embiid. I think they have a clear relationship. I mean, everyone loves Tyrese Maxey. That's just that he just kind of has that personality where he just kind of is a magnet, and people just gravitate towards that guy. So I think Batum would be a priority guy for sure. I think they would Lowry and Oubre too. I think they would love to have both of those guys back. I think they fit really well, not only on the court. I think they fit well in the locker room. When you're talking again about Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey, I think they fit well with those personalities. I think Nick Nurse clearly loves Kyle Lowry. I think him and Oubre kind of had an understanding and a good relationship. Oubre really gushed about Nurse at the end of the season. So it's just going to depend on what I think with Lowry. It's more possible because I can't see him getting more than maybe the minimum around the league. I'm curious to see what his market is. Same with Oubre. Like, I don't know. The market is clearly above the minimum for him, but I don't know what it is. So I think I'd have to see where he kind of think the Sixers are in the same boat, right? I think they kind of want to see where his market goes. Could they get him on that mid-level exception around $8 million, and then he could parlay that into a multi-year deal next offseason with the Sixers? We'll see. Hield, I'm not optimistic about Buddy Hield coming back. Because I get shooting gets paid and he can shoot. So I think someone will wind up maybe overpaying for him a little bit. Campaign, if he wants to come back on the minimum, I think he'd be a great guy as like a second or third ball handler. We saw the kind of juice he kind of brought in that Knicks series. He's a good basketball player, right? Like, for what he is just a solid NBA player. So again, if you can bring him back on the minimum, I think they'd have to be open to that. Beyond that, it's tough to know. Will Paul Reed be back? I don't know. That could be an interesting thing too with his the non-guaranteed contract now. Could he be used in a trade? Do they just waive him to clear more cap space? They can go a lot of avenues there. Could they use him in a sign-in trade for something bigger with Brandon Ingram? Like, there's a lot of different kind of funny things they could do. Again, just a lot of optionality, a lot of creativity Daryl Morey, could use this offseason.
Well, and the Melton thing, somebody brought this up the other day about, because I was talking about how Derek White is like a guy the Sixers just have not been able to get. That fourth, fifth guy who just is not afraid of the moment, like he's not the best, but when the other guys are struggling, he's not afraid of the moment. Was Melton supposed to be like that kind of guy, like that, hey, I can score 14, not every night, you don't need me, but when someone, we've never seen him really healthy. Did he fill the role that they went out and got him for? Probably not. He looked at times like he was there, but I don't know that they can count on him.
Yeah, I mean, I thought he was a really effective player when he was healthy, but like to your point, he just really, that back. It's 2 years in a row that back injury really creeped up on him, and it was clearly hindering him and his effectiveness. So again, he's another guy. I put him kind of in the same category as Oubre. Like, I think they would like to have DeAnthony Melton back. It's going to depend on what his market is. Does someone maybe throw it like maybe a team like Orlando could make some sense because they could use his shooting, and maybe you talk about balloon deals for the Sixers. Maybe they throw a balloon deal at him for like 1 year, $15 to $20 million, and that probably puts him out of the Sixers range. If he kind of goes around the market and doesn't see what he likes, maybe he circles back with the Sixers and kind of gets a 1 year prove it deal, and he can test free agency again if he can be healthy. So maybe he can make sense there. For the Sixers, I think he'd be a great fit. But I think the guy, Mike, when you talk about that Derek White type of guy, I think Kentavious Pope is the name I brought up before. I think that's the kind of guy who can do that. He's over 40% from three. He has some creation chops. Not a guy you want to have a huge role in that department, but he can do it, especially if other guys are having off nights. Defends at a very high level. So I think that's more the guy. But I think, I for sure, I think Melton can do some of those things. When he's healthy, he's a high level, high volume shooter. He can create off the dribble as like a secondary playmaker. He's an impactful defender, gets a lot of steals, gets his hands in the passing lanes a lot, pretty good on ball defender. So he can do a little bit of that. But again, his market, I think I'm just, again, very curious to see what anyone's going to throw him, and if that leads to him circling back with the Sixers.
Paul Hudrick from Liberty Ballers, and of course the offseason could be here before we know it. The NBA Finals could be finishing up here as soon as tonight. If Boston wins, you can sign your free agent starting tomorrow. Free agency begins right after the draft. The draft is a 2-day event. It's June 26th and the 27th, like 4 o'clock in the afternoon for the second round of the NBA draft. And, of course, we'll have more on the Sixers in the offseason. Paul Hudrick, everybody. Liberty Ballers at Paul Hudrick. Thank you, buddy.
You got it, Mike.
All right, there you go. Paul Hudrick, everybody, here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. Great segment with Paul. I know. Sixers are down on everyone's list right now. But the offseason, with a lot of assets and the ability to make a lot of changes, could change all that. It's Mike Gill. Whether you're a contractor or do-it-yourself, Progressive Fence and Railing has the region's largest selection of glass rail, cable rail, aluminum, composite, vinyl, with delivery to your home or job site on time and on budget. Or let the pros at Progressive install it for you. They'll help plan your project and get what you need when you need it. Visit ProgressiveFenceandRail.com or one of their 4 locations. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.